No, sorry, I want my hand to come down. I just don't know how to do it.
Okay, no problem.
Just click on the hand raise, like you raised your hand, just click on it again and it'll come off.
Thanks, Shay. Okay, so looks like the people joining has slowed down. So I think we've reached critical mass here. If you didn't hear me before, if you just joined, please make sure you enter your board's name in the chat so we know who is here. And once again, we are recording this session and we'll be able to share it with you later. And you do also have a copy of the slide deck attached to your meeting maker. Just another couple of housekeeping items. We do have this meeting configured so that you can unmute yourself and ask a question. We will have quite a bit of time reserved at the end for question and answer, but you know, you're also welcome to interrupt as I walk through this presentation with any comments or questions you have. You can do that by unmuting yourself, or you can add your question to the chat window. We will be monitoring that as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So this presentation is really to give you guys an overview of what childcare providers can expect with the relief funds that we are going to release here in just a few short weeks. So I'm going to walk through a little bit of background about the funding and then provide a brief overview of what providers can expect. And then we'll have time at the end, like I said, for question and answer. So a little bit of background. So this round of provider funding that we are making available at the beginning of June is coming out of that Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Act that was passed back in December. And Texas did get $1.13 billion, and we are dedicating $775 million of that for relief directly to providers. Now, that is going to include not only our subsidy providers, but also other regulated providers in the state that so far haven't received any assistance from us. So this is a big undertaking, a big project. We know that there are potentially around 14,000 programs that may be eligible. And then the commission also dedicated $15 million for us to engage with some entities to provide technical assistance and business coaching to help to assist providers through this process of accessing these funds, using these funds, making sure they document things correctly, and also just to help them work on strengthening their business practices overall. So today we're going to be more focused on what the application process will look like for providers. And then we are scheduling a follow-up call next week, same day and time. And I will send out that meeting maker just as soon as we finish this call. And next week's call, we will really talk in more depth about the technical assistance and business coaching that will be available. So again, today we're more focused on what this online application process looks like.
Allison, I'm not sure
Yes.
if you, I saw you share your slides earlier, but we can't see them at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, yeah, I see I'm not sharing anymore. That's weird because I didn't unshare.
I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Can you see it now? Okay. So let me just go back. Here's our agenda. I just gave you the background. Next, we'll step into the overview of what to expect, and then we'll have the Q&A. So this is the slide I was just speaking to about the SRSA funds. And then moving on, what to expect. So we're going to talk about who is eligible for these funds, how much a program can expect to get, and what the steps are for accessing the funds. So in determining whether or not a program is eligible, they do have to be a regulated provider. So they have to be either a licensed child care center, a licensed child care home, or a registered child care home. These funds will not be available to listed family homes, and that includes our relative care providers. So it's really only these three types of regulated care. The funds will be available to programs that were open as of May 1st. The data pull that we're getting from child care regulation that we will use for the online application system is based on the provider's status as of May 1st. There is also an expectation that is made clear in the contract they will sign, that when they apply for the funds, they should be open as well. So in order to show up in our file, they had to be open on May 1st, and we expect that they're still open when they make application for the funds. They also have to be in good standing with child care regulations, so they shouldn't be on a corrective or adverse action. And again, that's also going to be based on that May 1st date. We will be monitoring on a weekly basis the report we get from child care regulation on providers that are placed on corrective or adverse action. We'll be monitoring those, and if any come up that have applied for funds or in process of applying for funds or haven't yet applied for funds, we'll be dealing with those as they occur. Fortunately, it's typically a very small number of programs that we see on that report. And then the other eligibility criteria is that they actually have eligible expenses to apply these funds to. So I think one of the great things about this round of funding is that we are letting providers go back in time so they can apply any expenses that were occurred from the beginning of the calendar year. And then the grant period will go through August 31st of this year. So they've got a good 8-month period of time where they can apply expenses. So we don't anticipate that the majority of programs will have any trouble identifying and documenting those allowable expenses. Okay, so how much money will programs get? So this is the criteria that we're using to base the award amounts on. The program's license capacity, and again, this is data that we will get from child care regulation and load into our system and help us to calculate the award amount. It's also based on their location and the 75th percentile of the average price of care for all ages in their particular region. So that's based on, of course, the market rate survey, the 2020 market rate survey, and their quality rating. So if they are a Texas Rising Star provider, they do get a bump up depending upon their star level. If they're not Texas Rising Star, but they have a national accreditation, they will also get a bump up. It's not quite as significant, those, the Texas Rising Star add-on. And we have worked with our partner entities that offer these national accreditations, and these are the ones that are recognized in our rules and by Texas Rising Star. We worked with those entities to get a list of who those programs are, so we know which ones are nationally accredited but not TRS. And then the final factor that we look at is whether or not a program exists in a childcare desert. And we're basing this on the definition from House Bill 680 that was passed in the previous section that allowed for contracted slots models. It speaks to areas where the number of children under age 6 with working parents is at least 3 times greater than the available licensed childcare capacity. So that's the definition we're using, and it is based on zip code. Now, I want to share with you because I get that this can be complicated and maybe hard for some programs to understand. Well, what does that mean? How much money am I really going to get? We did include some examples in the discussion paper, but if you don't fit into one of those categories that we gave an example of, that may still be hard to figure out. So we have developed a calculator that we are going to make available online that providers can use to go in and enter their county, their zip code, their license capacity, their TRS ratings or accreditation, and it will calculate what their award amount will be. That calculator right now is going through some final quality control checks, and hopefully we will get that posted. I think we'll probably be able to get it posted tomorrow, but it kind of depends on the others who are doing quality control checks to give us the okay. But as soon as we have that posted, we will be sharing it with you guys. It will be on TWC's Childcare COVID webpage. So when you go to our homepage, twc.texas.gov, you'll see at the top a bunch of really prominent links related to COVID. If you click on the one that says childcare, it'll take you to our childcare COVID page, and that's where we will be posting it. It will also be available on our technical assistance providers website as soon as that goes live. So we're hoping that this will be broadly available so that providers can figure out how much they're going to get.
Allison, I just also mentioned to everyone that the list of zip codes that are childcare deserts will also be posted.
Great. Yes, that's
If
good
I could,
information to share.
Allison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is a huge issue for our task force. Our child care task force immediately recoiled over the idea that zip code has any correlation to a child care desert. The zip codes are not set up that way. So I think you just better prepare for appeals and conversation around, shouldn't it be census tract? Shouldn't it be by designated poverty area? The zip codes are really going to, I think, annoy people because it has nothing to do. Are you following a federal definition, or is that something we just established in Texas?
It's from the state statute, but I think it's fairly common. It's actually, and Shay can kind of speak to this because when she was at Children at Risk, this was the same sort of logic that they used in creating their childcare desert map, which preceded that legislation.
Yes, it's based on nationally recognized and definitions on childcare deserts. We understand, there is no perfect boundary, but part of the reason, a major reason actually zip code is chosen instead of census tract data is because of the data available to make these determinations. They are more readily available, or they are available at zip code and not at census tract, as small as census tract level.
And Shay, is there room to justify breaking a zip code into 2 parts? In other words, do you have an appeal process for choosing zip codes if we have proof that the zip code sort of belies the truth of the matter?
So Lori, this is Reagan. I would say for these grants, not at this point. For contracted slots, yeah, but I assume you're not worried about contracted slots. You're more concerned about this grant, these funds.
It was very much around this, Reagan, but it's my advocates, and I'm just pointing out you will hear
Yeah.
reason why it doesn't suit. Alan's very involved, Susan's very involved, and truly it is a simplification to use zip codes. There's no correlation And we're not even sure that zip codes look at working families being, you know, similar across zip codes. We know they don't. So it's kind of there's a good way to argue the data. That's all our point was. So
Yeah,
you know who
and
they are.
yes, we absolutely, and thank you for the heads up. We certainly understand there's no perfect way to do this. We certainly, as we were thinking about these higher kind of plus ups and grant amounts, obviously the biggest plus ups are for Texas Rising Star quality providers. This is a smaller plus up that, while not perfect, we are hoping will help address some of those areas that truly are deserts encompassing a larger geographic area where it is very difficult to find enough childcare for the kids in that area. But I do appreciate the heads up, and certainly something we can think about as we move forward.
Thank you all.
Of course. Okay, next, what can providers use the funds for? So the SRSA legislation is quite broad in what it allows providers to use these funds for. And we've gone forward with the decision that we would keep it broad for this round of funding, partly to keep things simple for implementation, and also there's a benefit to providers because they have a longer list of things they can call eligible expenses. So essentially activities that are necessary to maintain or resume the operation of programs, and that includes fixed costs and increased operating costs. And we've listed out some of the examples. We are going to be publishing a very comprehensive frequently asked questions document that will cover this in more detail, and I think address a lot of the questions that providers may have around allowable expenses. And of course, the technical assistance provider will also be available to answer questions in this space too. Okay, so what are the steps to accessing the funds? First of all, each provider will need to decide who is going to apply for the funds. If they have multiple sites, they can apply for multiple sites, but the individual who's making the application needs to be a controlling person on that operations permit. So controlling person is in the child care regulation data that we are getting. This is not publicly available information, but we are getting it in the file that's coming over to us. So they have to be one of those individuals that's named as a controlling person. And if they are applying for multiple sites, they would create a single user ID and be able to file multiple applications, one for each site. So again, just like the funding is based on per location, per operation, because we're using the market rate survey data as well as their license capacity, the applications they submit are also going to be per site, per operation. So the first thing that they'll get to initiate the process is an invitation email that will come directly from the system that TWC is developing. So they will get an invitation email for each operation. It will go to the email address that operation has on file with child care regulation. So this is the same email address that they use to log into their child care regulation portal. It's also the same email address they use to log into our child care availability portal. So that's where the invitation will go. We're working on getting the email address for that so that we can share that so that folks know what to keep an eye out for and hopefully prevent those from going to spam. And then they will just follow the link and the prompts from that email to set up their account. So they will have only 7 days to respond to that invitation. And that's just to go into the system and create their user account. They don't have to apply for the funds within 7 days, but they do have to acknowledge the invitation by going following the link and going into the system and creating an account. Okay, so this is a screenshot of what the online application looks like. And I have to apologize because some of these screenshots are very blurry, unfortunately. Our dev team is working at warp speed, and I didn't want to hassle them with giving me cleaner screenshots. So these are pulled from some requirements documents that we already had. Basically, it's very simple. This is what the first page will look like. It'll have basic information about the funds. And then you've got this menu bar on the side, a link to apply for funding, a link to the application list. So this is all of the applications that this user has submitted. And then there's also a support link that will include the frequently asked questions, as well as how to access technical assistance support and business coaching. So in order to apply, there's some things that the provider is going to need to have on hand. They need to know, of course, the name of the program they're applying for, and the licensing number, that operations ID with child care regulation. That's the same ID that we use in TWIST. They also need to make sure they've got the location and mailing address of the site they're applying for. And like I said before, they need to know the name and role of controlling person. So it's going to be first name, last name, and what that individual's role is. And that needs to match whatever is on their permit. Or in child care regulation system. And they can see that information if they log into their portal if they're not sure. And then they're also going to need to be able to provide payee information. So this is ownership code. That's the type of business they are. Is it a sole proprietor? Is it a corporation, a partnership, that kind of thing. And then depending upon what the ownership type is, they will need to provide an EIN, SSN, or ITIN for those. And they will have the ability to request the funds in multiple draws, or they can draw down all of the funds at once. When they draw down the funds, they need to ensure that they do have allowable expenses that they can apply those funds to. So since we're going all the way back to January, we do imagine that most providers probably are going to draw down the full amount and apply it towards expenses already incurred. We may have some providers, though, that maybe they were closed for the first few months of the year, or maybe it's a family home that doesn't have very good documentation for past expenses. And in those cases, they might do multiple draws and apply them to expenses as they go. Okay. And just to show you kind of how this is going to work and how they get verified. So once you click on apply for funding, you have to enter your operation number. You have to enter the controlling person's first name and last name. So this is the controlling person who is applying. You have to enter your role, and this is a drop-down list. Again, it's pulled from that child care regulation data. And you have to enter the zip code of this program's location. All of these fields have to match the data that we've received from child care regulation in order for you to proceed. So if something doesn't match, you're going to get an error message to try again. If there's some sort of problem, like maybe the controlling person that they thought was on their account is not there, they will be advised to seek out technical assistance to determine what their next steps are. But we will be relying on child care regulation as the record of this information. So if there is something wrong with it, there will be an expectation that it has to be fixed with child care regulation before we would make any kind of change in our system to line up with that. Okay, so if you're successful in entering that data to pull up the program you want to apply for, you will get this screen that is read-only that displays all the information, displays the basic information that we have about that program. So this gives them an opportunity to verify that this is all correct. And again, if they identify mistakes here, then they shouldn't proceed. They should seek out assistance to try to correct anything that's not right. Okay, so the next key step is having them provide us payee information. So this is the data that we are collecting in order to create a TINS number. So that's a Texas, I don't remember what it stands for. It's basically the number you get assigned from the comptroller, and it allows you to receive payments that are issued by the state. So since these payments will be issued from TWC, everybody who gets one needs to have a TINS number. So they will complete this information to help pull their existing TINS number or to create a new one. Okay. And then just the same with the last set of steps, they get an opportunity to review everything and confirm that this is correct. One of the important things to note is the payment mailing address. So payments will be mailed to the mailing address that is on file with child care regulation for that operation. So if they get this far and suddenly realize that that's not where the check should go, they should stop. And we will have a blurb here that directs them to not proceed, that they need to get that fixed. And again, things will have to be corrected through child care regulation, verified before we would make a change on our end. Because the whole idea here is, you know, to mitigate fraud risk and make sure the checks are going to who they should go to. Okay, and this screen's really blurry, I apologize, but this is the application list. So in this instance, this individual has submitted half a dozen different applications. So they must have, you know, a chain of centers that they operate, and they can see the status of their application, whether or not it's been processed or if it's still pending. And they can see the approved funding amount if it was processed, and they can see if they have a balance. And this would just be if they didn't draw down the full amount of funds. It will show their remaining balance. And this is where they would request funds too. So they can view detail, they can request additional funds. And then once they have submitted their request, they will be able to come back and see when the funds were actually issued. So all of the funds are going to be issued as paper checks. And that's for a few reasons. One was that we couldn't have stood this up so quickly if we did direct deposit. It would have required technically a lot more work and also a lot more staff involvement to process all of those direct deposit setups. This also, we think by issuing checks, it also helps mitigate fraud, and that we know more about where the money's going. Okay. So let me just check and make sure we don't have any chat questions that I'm missing. Okay. Okay, let me finish going through this and then I'll go ahead and hit these questions. What is required after the funds are accessed? So they are going to have to maintain documentation of the expenses that they are applying these funds to. So that would include things like bank receipts, bank records, paid invoices. We will be, after the fact, conducting some monitoring. Our SRM department is developing a risk model and will be generating a sample of providers that will be asked to produce this documentation. The documentation can cover any of the allowable expenses. And if one of those sampled providers does produce some documentation that doesn't satisfy the monitor, for instance, they have a receipt for something that occurred before January 1st. They would be given the opportunity to go back and identify some other additional documentation for different expenses that were allowable. So, you know, we will be working with them to make sure they're able to document things appropriately. And then, like I said before, there will be a lot more information about documenting expenses and the frequently asked questions, and the technical assistance and business coaching providers will also be available to assist with this. So for boards, your role, as you can see, this is being, you know, state administered. So there's not, you know, direct responsibility falling on the boards for this. And the reason we did that was, you know, economies of scale to stand up a single system to deliver all of these payments to 14,000 providers, you know, more than half of which boards don't currently have a relationship with. So this was just a more efficient way to stand it up, and will be result in more consistency. Okay, so yeah, your role is just to kind of understand the basics in case you get some questions, and know where to send programs where they can get more information. We are standing up a website, childcaretech.texas.gov, that will have more information and access to technical support and other resources and tools. Of course, we want you to encourage all providers to apply for these funds, and there will also be an email address that will go to the technical assistance provider that boards and providers can send questions to. We are also planning to send you a weekly update of what programs in your area have applied for funds.
And just to add on the website, if you go to it right now, it takes you to the availability portal so that we have something on there, but it will change and be updated, and then before the relief funds go live.
Okay. So let's see, if providers claim these funds, can they also claim the same expenses as an income tax expense for 2021? So that's going to fall under tax advice, which I don't think any of us on this call are equipped to give. But we will take that back and discuss that probably with our technical assistance provider, and see if that may be something we want to add to the frequently asked questions to at least give some direction on that. Okay, another question. Sometimes the email used to log into childcare regulation is a staff member and not the controlling person. So I believe that the email is just where the invitation is going. They will need to work with the other individuals that are part of that operation to identify who the controlling person is that is going to apply for the funds, whose name is going to be on the contract, basically. So they will have to share that information if they're not the ones that are going to be completing the application. And it can be, you know, it can be the director that is applying. In some situations, I'm sure it will be. Okay. When requesting technical assistance, who does the early learning program contact? So we haven't yet signed those contracts with our technical assistance and business coaching providers, but as soon as we do, we will be sharing that email address contact information. It will also be in the frequently asked questions and on the website. it will be easy to find, but I can't share it right now. Okay, similar to the tax question, can providers claim, are the funds considered income? So I'm going to give the same answer to this one. This is also like a tax advice question. And actually this question came up on one of the national calls recently. I'm not sure anybody has an answer to this yet, but we will definitely follow up on that and look at adding something to the FAQ. Okay, will there be an exhaustive list of allowable expenses? For example, property tax, drug background check, new educational materials, resources. We've made an effort to try to capture a lot of these examples, but there will not be an exhaustive list. I don't think that's possible. You know, we can't know what fixed and operating costs every single provider in the state has. So if a provider does not create an account within the 7 days, will they not be able to get to this grant? If they fail to respond to that invitation email and they're like locked out, then they're going to need to contact technical assistance, and we will work with them to reissue an invitation if appropriate. So they won't be, you know, SOL. Okay, did I get all of those questions? Shay and Reagan, did you want to add anything to what I said?
Allison, do you think we need to just make sure it's understood the application will only be open for a certain time period?
Yes, that's a good point. So we are planning to leave the applications open, like available to submit new applications for 30 days from the date that we go live. And at this point, we're thinking we will go live probably mid to late week, that first week of June. So they'd have 30 days from there. No, we do, and that's the direction that we're giving in all the messaging we're sharing. We do, however, have the ability to adjust that if needed. So if we get close to the end of that 30 days and it looks like the numbers are really low on programs that are applying, we have the flexibility to extend that out. We do keep it to kind of a tight window, though, as much as we can, just because that's another way to mitigate fraud.
And just so everyone understands the way that this can work, once they start the application process, oh, Allison, we see your email screen.
I know, I was trying to move it over.
Once they start the application process, you know, they will have access to, you know, their login and being able to upload, you know, submit for funds as they go along beyond that 30-day window. The 30-day window is just for them to get started and to get through the relatively simple application process. But again, they have until through the end of August to have expenses, and they may even have beyond that to submit for reimbursements. But so there are a few different kind of timelines in there.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so as I said earlier, we are going to hold another call at the same time next week. And on that call, we will be able to provide a lot more information about that first line technical assistance and the specialized business coaching and supports that are going to be available for childcare centers and family home-based providers. So that, that meeting invitation will go out this afternoon, so keep an eye open for that. Other questions? Okay. Not
Yes, I think there was one from Lisa. If the provider doesn't activate the account within 7 days, can they get another invite?
Yeah, so that was the same question David had, and the answer is yes. They will have to contact the technical assistance provider, and you know, if it's a legitimate request, we will have our IT team reissue an invitation for them. Okay. If there aren't any other questions, I can give you back part of your lunch hour. Feel free to send in questions that you think about later. And even if we don't have an answer, like on the tax questions, it helps us to think through what kinds of questions we're going to get from providers and to, you know, do some research on those. So we welcome that. You can send questions to Child Care Program Assistance, and my team will pick those up and figure out what we need to do with them. All right, with that, I'll wish you guys a good afternoon, and we'll talk to you next week. Thank you.